it's going to be an interesting transition, I think. So even though I also come from rural communities and very proudly do so, and love our context, we'll be looking at a slightly different angle of rural life in the presentation I do. This is a poster that was designed by young people involved in our group in the Macedon Ranges, which includes the towns of Gisborne, Kyneton, Woodend. The poster says a lot about who we are and the sort of work that we do. Research estimates, and quite consistently, that about 10% of the population will identify as same-sex attracted, gay, lesbian or bisexual. In Victoria, this means there's probably around about 500,000 people who don't identify as heterosexual. Of these, some 96,000 will be aged between the ages of 14 and 24 years. And approximately 25,000 of those young people will be living in rural and regional areas. This represents a significant minority in our community by any standard. However, like other minorities, life for same-sex attracted young people is less than easy. This is not the result of any deficiencies arising from their sexuality as such, but it is a clear reflection of the isolation and our community's inability to understand and respond to their needs in the same way that they do heterosexual young people. The most striking manifestation of this fact is that our project has been funded under the Victorian Government's youth suicide prevention strategies, and it's generally estimated that same-sex attracted young people, including those in rural communities who are often at greater disadvantage, attempt suicide at 3.5 to 14 times higher rates than their heterosexual counterparts. A few years ago, a survey of some 25,000 Australians revealed that approximately 1/3 of people in this country believe that homosexuality is immoral. The good news is, therefore, that about 2/3 don't. However, what this study also found that there was distinct demographic patterns in the way prejudice played out in our community, and one of the most important sort of significant axis of this prejudice was affiliation with religious belief. Only 19% of people who identified that homosexuality was immoral said that they didn't subscribe to a religion. However, about 70% of Baptists, about 62% of evangelical Christians, and about 46% of Methodists considered homosexuality was immoral. Surprising to myself as a person who went to Catholic schools, Roman Catholics were the most tolerant, with only about 34% stating prejudicial beliefs. Yeah. Catholics are very good at holding contradictory concepts. I know that to say I mean that. I would like to make it very clear before going any further that I fully endorse and uphold people's right to religious beliefs and freedom. However, whilst some religious views and beliefs can be a great source of social justice in our community, religious beliefs against homosexuality are a source of great harm to many in our community. I know that not all people with religious beliefs hold negative views towards same-sex attracted people, and I'm very pleased to say that there are many young people within our groups who proudly identify as Christians. I'm also very pleased to say that we have a long-standing of working very successfully with a range of different Catholic schools and organisations who are church-based, and I was really pleased to meet John from United Care in Gippsland today, because our agency has been working with, in partnership with their fabulous youth group for about 4 or 5 years now. And I applaud them for the work that they've been doing within their own religious faith on the questions of social justice towards gay and lesbian members of their religious communities. I have, however, seen religious views against homosexuality tear some young people apart. I've seen it isolate children from their parents, from their friends and from their communities. I know that this is a very complex issue, but it is not one that's going to go away. And we need to engage in much more open and constructive debate about how we can strike a proper balance between the right to religious freedom and our community's right to freedom from discrimination. Obtaining equal recognition and rights has been something that our community has had to fight for many decades. And all major social institutions have been involved. I'll just track back over history to give you some examples. Up until 1973, homosexuality was classified by psychiatry as a mental disorder. And prior to that, many in our community had been subjected to an appalling range of torture, otherwise legitimated under the labels of aversion therapy and treatment. In this state, it was only in 1980 that homosexuality was declassified as a criminal offence. And it was only 10 years ago that the Victorian Equal Opportunity Laws prohibited discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. Whilst there has been clearly many important gains at the formal level, the struggle sort of still continues, and examples include the right of couples within our community to marry, legally adopt children, and also something that we've been quite closely involved in, our right to equal protection under the Equal Opportunity Laws, which currently exempt religious organisations from discriminating against people on the basis of their marital status, sexuality and gender identity. There are, however, many reasons for hope and many fabulous reasons for hope, and these can be found at many different levels within our community. At the systems level, a very important concern for the well-being of our young people is being expressed in both words and actions by an increasing number of members of Parliament and government departments. Critically, our sector is now, for the first time ever, starting to see some dedicated funding and longer-term commitments from the government to the provision of services for our young people. This announcement that was recently made by the Minister for Mental Health was the first announcement of its type, and whilst absolutely fabulous support is being shown, I would estimate that we'd be lucky to have a dozen full-time funded workers to respond to the needs of these 96,000 young people in the state. Another basis for great hope, and this is what often keeps people such as myself and others engaged in the field going, is the fabulous and sometimes random support that we get from members of the community. This is a photo that, an initiative that young people in our shire thought up, taken about 18 months ago. We put out a general call to our community. My office is based in the town of Kyneton, which has a population of 4,500 people. And we put out a general invitation to members of the community to come along and be involved in the biggest possible community photograph of people against homosexuality. Now we got about 140 people turn up for that day, and we just thought that was fabulous. And as you can see, they're quite a diverse bunch. We know, I know from personal experiences, the young people know from personal experiences, that there are good people out there, and there are good people who align ourselves and support our community irrespective of what their sexuality or gender identity is. These may be teachers discreetly supporting and protecting an individual student at their school. It may be heterosexual workers in human service agencies implementing policies and procedures that positively encourage gay and lesbian service users. And it also involves general members of the public joining in our efforts to effect law reforms. In my view, I believe the greatest basis for hope, however, is the skill, resilience and conviction of young people that we work with and have the privilege of meeting in our community. This is part of our crowd from the Masson Rangers group. Since starting work in this field about 9 years ago, I have learnt many times over that young people seem to intuitively know a lot about some very complex things, such as how to tackle discrimination and discriminatory views and beliefs in our community. They knew it much better than I'd actually ever learnt in terms of my own professional travels and ironically of my study at university. And their approach, I think, has been very smart on so many different levels. Our project's been directed a lot by the young people, and one of the first things that they pointed out was that they didn't want to have a group for gay kids. What they wanted to do was to have a group that welcomed all young people. And that's been the cornerstone of our project's model, is that young people are forming gay-straight alliances with each other. And through that there's a greater critical mass growing, and there's also a greater strength in the message that is being communicated by these groups. Certainly, under the weight of many oppressive forces that can be bearing down on them, the young people do experience great periods of vulnerability, and I think it's our duty as adults, our unquestioning duty as adults, to ensure that we are able to provide them with all of the skill and support that we can at those vulnerable times. I also believe that it's our responsibility to ensure that they are given the information and the opportunities necessary to take their rightful place as leaders in our community and communities that celebrate diversity both today and into the future. So